Sixers to a place not visited since they were led by that other doc known as Jay. We've got a fever, and the only prescription is more Pistons Live, and it starts right now. Back we go as the Pistons prepare to return to work. The Philadelphia 76ers have arrived for the first of two games over the next 3 days, led by Joel Embiid and our old pal Tobias Harris. They roll into town with the best record in the East. It is a Saturday night with the Sixers as we welcome you inside Little Caesars Arena to Pistons Live alongside lottery loser Grant Long. I'm lottery loser Mickey York here.
We're not sure of that.
No, we're sure because we showed up for work here tonight. It took a while for the Pistons to get going last night before eventually falling to the Rockets by a point. Maybe the fact that they're not tipping until 8 o'clock tonight will help them out in that regard. And there's also this. They didn't have to travel last night like the Sixers did. So if you're looking for an edge, Grant, there's that. There's also this. The Pistons be without Blake Griffin and Derrick Rose tonight.
Well, here's the edge. The Pistons really didn't get going in that first half of basketball last night, so they should have another half to at least of energy to get going and to start this basketball game. 14 turnovers in the first half of play. For Jeremy Grant, he was 0 of 7 on his first shots, so you figure he's going to have something stored up to get ready, and hopefully the whole team will be prepared to start the game tonight, unlike they were last night.
Yeah, the Pistons coming off a pair of losses that sting in different ways. They blew a huge lead in that loss to Atlanta, and then last night couldn't overcome a 20-point deficit to the Houston Rockets. They were once again led in scoring, as Grant said, by Jeremy Grant, but they also got balanced contributions from guys like Wayne Ellington and DeLon Wright. Wright in our GMC Pro Vision shows you why the Pistons need more of that.
Inclusiveness is what we're talking about here. That's so good when you have guys who understand this is an offense that's not necessarily predicated on Jeremy Grant being the dictator of everything. When you include everybody in your offense, you have nights where guys like Jeremy Grant gets off to a tough start, but the other guys can pick you up. Here's a perfect example. DeLon Wright's going to move well without the basketball. Even though he plays the point sometimes, this particular time he's off the ball, makes a nice backdoor cut. They find him. That gets him going. All of a sudden his confidence starts to rise. Now you see the shot go up. Look what everybody's doing. They're paying attention to everyone except DeLon Wright, and he sneaks in for the two-hand putback. Gets him a dunk, the first one of the year, I believe. And then here he is again, moving well without the basketball, gets a screen, recognizes that the defender goes underneath it, sets his feet, and lets it fly from beyond the arc. Shot 66% from the three-point line in yesterday's ball game. Hopefully that will continue tonight.
Yeah, and then there was Josh Jackson, who really gave the Pistons a lift off the bench, especially in that second quarter. Led the reserves with 12 points, but he provided a lot more than just offense last night for the Pistons.
Again, when the team started off slow in the first quarter, it was Josh Jackson and DeLon Wright who really came in and gave this ball club a big lift in the compartment, or rather the department of energy. Sometimes it's not about scoring points. It's about if you can create some energy that becomes contagious with your teammates, and that's exactly what Josh was able to do. On top of that, he was also able to knock down some shots. He played solid defense in front of the basket. That's a key block right there for the Pistons of, hey, let's continue to play. We were struggling early, but we got a guy like Josh Jackson out here giving that type of energy, and again, it becomes contagious, and all of a sudden the Pistons team started to turn some things around, and they pushed ahead and got that 20-point deficit underneath them.
And rookie Isaiah Stewart was fun to watch last night.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a pest. Finished with 7 points and recorded 10 rebounds for the second time this season. Did his fight sort of inspire the Pistons? I mean, did they feed off that a little bit last night?
And here's the reason why. Because there's not going to be an offensive set call for Isaiah Stewart at this point in his career. Rookie, he's just learning his way. But what you have to understand is that he recognizes that to get on the floor, he's got to provide a lot of energy. He's got to rebound. He's got to play stout defense. He cannot back down, and I don't care who he's playing against. And he certainly didn't do that last night against DeMarcus Cousins. He was very physical. In fact, he initiated a lot of the
good things the Pistons did. Failing to close out games continues to be their Achilles heel, whether it's blowing big leads or failing to totally overcome them. The Pistons finish about as well as a procrastinating do-it-yourselfer. Not that I or Mrs. York knows anyone like that. Johnny Kane, fortunately, is a guy that gets things done, and he's been closing in on this story. Johnny?
Mickey, that reminds me of an expression that goes, Procrastinate now. Don't put it off.
That's exactly right.
But seriously, if you look at the last 3 games, Pistons certainly had opportunities to win them. We'll go back to the last 2 in particular. You touched on a little bit. You blow a 17-point fourth-quarter lead against Atlanta. You lose in overtime. Then last night, come back from 20 points down, have a shot to win it at the end. But, of course, the foul committed against Jeremy Grant came after the final horn. All this to say is these are experiences for a young roster. Hurtful experiences in some ways, but keep in mind that you can learn a lot through failure.
I don't know how to describe that. I mean, we're definitely, we as a whole, as a team, we feel like we're going to turn that corner. It's coming. It's right there. As you can see these past 2 games, we're fighting all the way to the end. And, it's anybody's game. It's just more focusing on, all the little mistakes, as a team, clean those things up. And it's going to give ourselves a better chance to win the game.
I commend our guys for coming back in the second half, but we dug ourselves such a big hole that it took just too many shovels to get out of it. So, again, we're finding ways to get back into it, get ourselves in a position to win, and we're due.
And they are due. It's a tough stretch here coming up. 5 games in 7 days, including tonight against the top team in the Eastern Conference. I'll have a chance to talk with Coach Casey yet again here in just a few minutes, and we'll talk about the difficult road ahead. Nick?
All right, Johnny, look forward to that. Thank you. Grant, as we talked about earlier, I mean, there's no question the Pistons have their go-to guy in Jeremy Grant, but even that's a new role for him. So how do the Pistons improve in these situations where they need to close out games?
Well, I think, first of all, 2 things. They're young. They're going to have their issues at closing out basketball games. The second thing is we can't rush experience. It just has to happen. So the Pistons have put themselves in these situations to close out basketball games. They've come up short. Let's be honest. They have. They've made some serious mistakes that prohibited them from winning the basketball game, but they are learning experiences. The one thing that I will say about this ball club is they remain competitive. They don't hang their head. And if you can keep putting yourself in those positions to win basketball games in the closing moments, at some point you're going to recognize what it takes to win those games, and you're going to turn things around. The important thing is that they are in those positions, and sooner or later, as I mentioned, you will learn how to win those basketball games, making your free throws. We saw the Pistons miss a lot of free throws in yesterday's basketball game. That comes with experience as well. We often talk about, well, what does this experience mean? What happens with this experience? Well, you got to learn that you got to make your free throws at the end of the basketball game. You can't turn the basketball over. And also the beginning of the game also means a lot toward the end of the basketball game. It doesn't, as a player, you don't recognize that. But if you start the ball game off with 14 turnovers, yeah, that's going to bite you sometime later in the basketball game, because now you're fighting uphill. And if I can borrow a term from the resident expert, Mickey Redmond, you get no shots on the basket when you turn the basketball over. So the Pistons are learning all of that on the fly with this young group.
Yeah, as Dwayne Casey said, the biggest upside from these experiences is just that, the experience of being in these situations. Well, starting or finishing for the Pistons, it will all be a challenge tonight, because as we see in tonight's Ram Breakdown, the Philadelphia 76ers roll into town as the top team in the East and just swept 2 games from the Celtics. They're a talented team, so I don't know if this qualifies as a surprise, but they've always been a little flaky and tough to trust at playoff time. But Doc Rivers seems to have cleaned some of that up. Plus, they have Joel Embiid, who's been absolutely dominant so far this season, Grant.
Yeah, he has. And the Pistons, or rather the Philadelphia 76ers, you start and end with Joel Embiid. He's one of the best big men, if not the best big men in the league right now. And you wonder how he's doing it, because, in fact, he's probably the closest to a traditional center that we're going to see in today's NBA. But he can get outside and shoot the 3. He can play well, very close to the basket. He's got back to the basket moves. So he's got the entire package. And the Philadelphia 76ers are going to ride his experience. He's healthy now. And you think the years ago, he wasn't too healthy. Now he's playing in just about every game. So his health has always been an issue, but this year it's not.
Embiid handles the things inside for the Sixers. Our old pal Tobias Harris handles things outside for the Pistons, comes in shooting a career best clip from the floor and beyond the arc.
Yeah, and averaging just about 20 points a game. We already knew that Tobias Harris was a phenomenal talent. The guy could do just about everything required from a small forward. Shoot the ball from distance, put the ball on the deck. An excellent defender as well. He's one of those guys that can give you everything you need. and you don't have to call a play for him. He just seems to gel with everybody that he plays with. You think about his productivity, even though he's playing on the team with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, but he's almost unheralded at what he brings to the table every single night. If I'm Doc Rivers, I'm loving having a guy like Tobias Harris on my team.
The Sixers have been sensational at home so far this season. On the road, it's been a little bit of a different story, just 1-4 coming into Detroit tonight. All right, up next, we transition from the round ball to the football as the high school football season reaches its conclusion at Ford Field. Championship highlights from our award-winning crew when we continue from the Ram Desk.
At Mastercraft, we engineer doors that turn houses into homes, that add value and comfort, that make life easier and more secure. From traditional doors that everyone...
Joined by Greg Anthony and Channing Frye. We got a lot on tap for you tonight on the CarMax pregame show. We're going to get you ready, of course, for the game that will be on our air, but we will discuss some other things. We're going to start off, though, gentlemen, talking about the Brooklyn Nets, because there's a lot there to unpack as we talk about the Nets. Let's go with the Nets defense. Oh, don't laugh yet.
Shocker.
Greg, we haven't shown anything.
Shocker.
This is their defense the last two games, guys. Of course, against the Cleveland Cavaliers, everyone expected the outcome to be different. I draw your attention to that last line, opponent's paint. 64 in game one against the Cavs, 70 in game two. You guys know it is tough to pull off victories when you're allowing that much scoring in the paint. Defense is something that the Nets know they have to work on. In fact, Nets head coach Steve Nash had this to say about some improvements and adjustments for his team.
We just got to refine the things that we've been doing. You know, we haven't done them well enough. We haven't communicated enough. We haven't made second efforts. You know, at times it feels a little bit like we want a solution rather than a fight. And so we just got to make sure our mentality is strong and we stick together. We keep pushing to you know, refine those details, like I keep saying, and then we can improve defensively. You know, I don't think there's a magic answer, you know, to you know, no matter what scheme you go to, you have to, it has to be five men in concert, defending actions with intelligence and passion.
Okay, so Greg, we're going to start with you because you had a little response before we even saw the defensive graphic for the Brooklyn Nets. What say you about how they can make some improvements? What has to happen?
It'll be a challenge for them. And again, this is not an excuse, but it's a reality because you didn't have a full training camp. You haven't had an opportunity to create habits and establish a culture defensively. And listen, let's be real. It was never the identity of this Nets team to begin with. And so that's going to be an issue for them moving forward. They're going to have to continue to work on it and emphasize it. And one thing I will say, everybody will point to Kyrie, James, and Durant. Those guys are, honestly, they're plus defenders. They're not bad defenders. Their problem is they struggle to control their defensive backboard, and they don't contest shots with as much veracity. And I'm talking about this group collectively. They're relying on a lot of players that really aren't ready for prime time yet. They're going to take some time to adjust. The game's still easy for Durant, Harden, and Kyrie. Those guys on that side of the floor offensively, they're fine. They're playing well. But on the other side, they're going to have stronger leadership and more accountability. And the problem is, with the way the season's laid out, and Channing, you know this, all you can do as Steve Nash is what he just did in that soundbite, is talk about it. You can't practice. You can't push guys. You got Kyrie coming off injuries. You got Durant coming off an Achilles. And so it's going to be hard for them. Their games are going to be practice. They're going to have to establish habits and culture within the games. And in doing that, you're going to have some lumps. You're going to get caught a lot. And remember also, they're going to get everybody's best. It's almost like they're the defending champs right now, because what's the entire NBA world talking about, guys? The Brooklyn Nets.
Yep.
The Lakers are playing tonight. They're the defending champs with arguably the biggest star of the game. We're not talking about that. We're focusing on the Brooklyn Nets.
Channing, we know that defense is something that is accumulated over a period of time, right? You have to build it up with building blocks. You have to work on your strategies. What is the quick fix for this Nets team?
I think, being on a veteran team and guys that are coming off injuries, for me, it's walkthroughs, right? If you don't want guys to be on their feet, we did a lot of walkthroughs in Cleveland where we would watch film and literally go over what we were supposed to do over and over. It was tedious. I did it in Phoenix when we went to Western Conference Finals. It was tedious, but it created habits, like Jay says. And so for me, it would be keep the ball away from the paint. Like make their power comes from keeping the ball in front of them and not let it getting in the paint. And obviously the Cavs are a different team. They have 6 gigantic big men, right? Like a trio of ogres down there, and Jared Allen and Andre Drummond and McGee were having a field day. But for me, it's for them. If they keep people away from the paint and make them settle on jumpers and get out in the fast break, they're almost unstoppable. They have 3 of the game's best offensive players right now. And if you can get a stop and get out and run, teams cannot compete with you.
I'm glad you brought that up, GA. We were talking about this, right? The offensive power of this Nets team. So we all know there's a defensive deficit. They've even acknowledged that. But the offense is so strong. So what is the potential for this team? I believe this. I don't know that there's ever been a trio as offensively gifted as this trio. And this is not hyperbole. If you go look at the game historically, there have been some great teams. And typically, you might have those 2 guys that are A and A minus, right? Mm-hmm. But they've got 3 A's. Think about it. Kyrie Irving is supposed to be that 3rd guy. He's averaging 29, 6, and 5. And it's not on volume. 52 from the field, 40, I think 3 from 3, and 97 from the line. Wow. He's been efficient at scoring it. Durant, efficient at scoring it. Harden's been efficient. So offensively, the one advantage they have is they don't have to be as good defensively as some other teams because their offensive firepower is such that they can make up for some of the deficit. But when you get into the postseason, and we got a long way to go, right. And if they're healthy, the problem, though, is they're going to, as you get deeper, you're going to play better teams. And those teams are going to be able to game plan. And they're going to have a little bit of an effect on the greatness of that trio. And so you've got to be able to offset that with some competence on the defensive side of the floor. And I said this earlier, Durant is a plus defender. Harden was 6th in the league in deflections last year and led the league in steals. He's not a broke defender. Kyrie can defend. It's not his staple, but when his mind is right and if he's being held accountable, he's not a horrible defender, but it's not a part of the DNA of this group. And that's where Steve Nash and Mike D'Antoni, and I know it sounds like an oxymoron to mention those 2 with defense, but that's the reality. They're going to have to figure out a way to make it about that. If I'm them, I'm not even coaching offense. I wouldn't spend any time on their offense because you don't need plays with those 3 guys. You just play random offense, and they're going to be able to consistently score the basketball and create opportunities for everybody. What you got to do is just focus wholeheartedly defensively to get better, not become great, but they've got to be a top 12 defensive team, I think, to really have a legit chance to come out of the East. Well, it is still early, so we will continue to watch and monitor the Nets' defensive prowess and see if it can grow. In the meantime, though, Kyrie Irving, who is one of the leaders of this team, had this to say on social media. I won't read the whole thing, but basically it starts off, "We will be on that stage, the stage where the, quote, best of the best meet." The main stage. So you can read on from there. He's basically saying either you're with us or you're against us, chanting, "I come to you," because you have played with Kyrie. Are we to read into this, or is this just one of those throwaways that maybe he's just venting?
You can do what you want, honestly. I think for him, right, I think for everyone's going to kind of dissect it. But for me, I look at it like, hey, we got to, as a team, this is a new situation, not for James Harden or KD or Kyrie, but for the guys off their bench. And so, there is a lot of pressure. And like you said, it's like the Lakers are the champions, yet every single night we're talking about the Nets, what they are doing, what they're not doing. Kyrie, since the beginning of the season, next to James Harden, has been the two biggest stories of the NBA, which is wild. So for him, I think he's just trying to say to his teammates and everyone that supposedly or doesn't believe in him, it's like, hey, it's a long season. Let's ride it out. But if you're with us, you're with us. But that's not kind of how life works, right? It's our job to dissect every single game, right? We're not dissecting him as a human. We're dissecting the game. And they lost to the worst offensive team in the league, and they put on a show. So give credit to the Cavs. But as media members, we do have to judge just the play. And so, you know, for me, I'd probably say I'd laugh at him and make fun of him. But as a teammate, it's kind of my shtick. So don't read into it and just kind of, okay, let's see what you say tonight. Don't put a tweet out or Instagram thing out and don't get a win the next night, because then you're going to look crazy.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out shortly what he's going to look like.
Listen, look, don't put it out there now. Look, you get barbecued. Then we really going to talk about it.
Greg, let's talk a little bit about James Harden. We all know what he can do, right? He's averaged triple-doubles before. The assist, I feel like it's an underrated portion of his game. We always talk about his shooting and his ability to get a bucket at any time. But now that he's with another MVP and another All-Star, how important is his playmaking ability?
I think it's critical to this team because it does give that trio balance. And I've said this before. Listen, James Harden's one of the 5 best passers in the NBA. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not just about, like, people equate your ability to pass with assists. No, it's the angles he can create, the play ahead type of mindset he has, the next step, the vision he has in terms of throwing guys open, creating easy opportunities for guys who aren't as skilled offensively. And I think he's also, again, it's not like he's played with Kyrie and Kevin Durant before. Like he's never had the kind of firepower that those guys possess. And I think you're seeing how he's played. He's still going to score the basketball, but he's their primary ball handler and facilitator. And don't discount the ability to pass of both Durant and Kyrie as well. I just think all 3 of those guys do everything really well, but I think he is by far the best passer. And I think he's the guy that's already taken the ownership of, I'm going to be the facilitator. You can see it. The ball's in his hands to make plays.
Such an interesting experiment, this Nets team. I'm really eager to see how it blossoms. Now, they actually have an opponent tonight. They're playing the Miami
Not that team. None of them playing,
Unfortunately.
Right? Goodness gracious.
These are all the missing pieces for the Heat. Out tonight for various reasons. You can see under their names. Butler still out due to protocols. Hero with his neck situation is out. This will be his 5th game that he's missing due to his neck injury. Bradley, COVID-19. Leonard again with the shoulder and Silva with the hip. So, I mean, this is a different Miami Heat team. Obviously, Butler is the huge piece, but those other pieces, they're not bad either. So what kind of team are you expecting to show up against the Nets, Channing?
I'll tell you this. Listen, they're going to play hard, right? I don't care who's out there. It could be 5 grandmas. Spoelstra and Pat Riley going to have them prepared and have them ready to fight. So for me, anytime you play a Miami Heat team, they're not going to beat themselves. So you're going to have to go out there aggressive, prepared, and they may be missing a bunch of their scoring and defense and whoever, but the guys that are playing are trying to earn minutes. This is a championship caliber team. Goran Dragic is one of my favorite teammates of all time. He can play. Bam is legit. They have other guys on that team who are going to go out and be pros and give themselves a chance. And so for me, it's always interesting to watch them. They could just plug and play guys you've never heard of, and they're going to go in there, stay within themselves, play hard, dive on the floor, and you're going to have to go in there and beat them. They're not going to beat themselves.
All right, it will be interesting. Kendrick Nunn coming off of a great performance, 22 points in the last game. You mentioned Bam Adebayo. He's got a couple of games that I know he wishes he could have gotten back with the 14 points. So we'll see how that goes right here on NBA TV. James Harden, one of the big 3 for the Brooklyn Nets last game, a double-double with 19 points and 11 assists. We'll be back with a lot more.